see you. See you for a while.
I just returned from that.
Where is the face
Up for a conference.
All right, well, why don't we get started? Welcome to the board's July 11th briefing session. We have about 4 things on our agenda today, and the first of those is the General Manager's Conference. So, Will, you have some comments you'd like to
I
make?
will, and I'm going to keep those very brief
Okay,
because we have a full list otherwise. But I did want to just report to you a little bit on ridership. Overall, we were down a little bit in June. I think it might reflect a little bit the gas prices beginning to decline again too. But we did see more than 8.5 million trips taken on the system overall in the month, which is a good number. For 16 consecutive months now, actually peak hour ridership is up, so we're beginning to see, I think, the effects of the increasing employment base, and so that's good news for all of us. Bus trips climbed again about 1.5 or about 0.3% overall to about 100,000. So good result. One thing that I would note is West was up 7.4% and carrying out 1,740 on a daily basis. So not the double-digit increases, but still very healthy increases as ridership grows. And I think that's probably to be expected as we continue to write that service. I did want to also give you just a quick update on the student pass question, as it's been certainly continues to be in the news. And we are engaged with the City of Portland staff and looking for the right kind of compromise that really follows the principles that you outlined in your budget statement, which is really a shared responsibility sort of notion. And so we're looking for some creative ways that we can at least deal with the 1-year problem, and then sort of make sure that we're lined up to have a shared responsibility associated with any program like that going forward. Your board president outlined and thought at one point in time that the city had accepted sort of a one-third arrangement where Trimet was sort of the junior partner and 1/3 and so that continues to be sort of the basis of what I'm working through and looking for a way to make that happen. What is a tight budget for both agencies is a difficult issue. So the conversation's been constructive. We don't have white smoke out of the chimney, no solution in hand, but we're working hard on it. We really have, again, the mayor had postponed that original ordinance until the 25th. Using that as the goal feels like that's a good deadline for us to sort of work through. But a lot of that will have to happen this week and next week for us to be successful there. But just a quick response on that. That really concludes the main issues of my report. So if there are any questions about issues, I might also note that we've also been in the news with operators and some repeat issues, and I will have an update to you by the end of this week on that. Again, continue to work through the due process required for our union employees as we work through that issue, and we'll have a result here hopefully shortly on that. And just to note, we have scheduled a briefing. We're going to Saragossa asked for an update on our LEP program, for lack of a better description, but it's broader than that, and we'll make sure that that's on the agenda. I think we're hoping to do that actually at a July business meeting.
Questions? So questions by the board? I guess just comment on the student fair. Some assistance. Please don't hesitate to call me.
One thing, Mr. President, on the school pass, the city are engaged. It's the Portland Public Schools. Are they coming in with this conversation as well?
Not yet. They have budgeted at $1 million for the program, which is essentially 1/3 of the lost revenue that we're dealing with. So, I think that's a good building block, but it may not be the ultimate all-time solution for them. So they do need to come to the table.
And I think they were prepared, Dr. with 1/3. Thought that was where it was going. Conversation about it. I think that's not the issue.
Well, I'm sure.
Please.
You said there was a target of July 25th, is that going back to city council? Or
Well, that's.
Hopefully not, or-
Hopefully not.
Okay.
Hopefully the mayor will have pulled it and will not bring it back, but we'll see where that goes.
Okay.
And just one last
Please.
question on that. So that will be for young folks who are qualified for reduced lunch, or do we know at this point?
The program that the mayor is in favor of, pushing us to participate is for everybody. So that's the objective. I think we've been pretty clear that, you know, a reasonable fallback, which targets the need, would be for students who are looking for a reduced lunch. At least, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn for the board, but that we would be good with and supplement the school district's contribution to make sure that those students had passes for the next year.
I think that's the other thing we should remember. The discussion I think we've had is we're talking about, we're 1 year right now, and this is something we've got to look at in the context of our next budget year too, because we know it's, based on the trends we've got right now, it doesn't look that much better. We know we made some major cuts, we still know we've got some budget concerns, so we've got to have that dialogue some more, and that may be the next iteration where we want to go, if not further discussion, how we phase it out or do it in a different way in the future.
So with that, let's hope that we can reach an agreement.
Yes.
It seems like a next step would be for, within the first quarter of, say by November 1st, that the school district, the city, and Trimet agree on what are the principles, what are the outcomes we're seeking to fulfill through this partnership to provide for student passes, or if it's simply about money, we're gonna always be back at the same spot. We've had conversations about that these passes provide accessibility for students who don't have customary school bus transportation. Well, that's an educational responsibility that isn't necessarily a public transit or city responsibility, except in this community. So by itself, if it's only about money, or it's about the lack of how the Portland public school system is operating public transportation for students, and we're going to be here again and again. We've had conversations that there's an economic development opportunity for young people who have access to jobs as well as access to schools. There's a public safety responsibility or outcome in terms of having students have the ability to not be on the street, walking, biking, skateboarding. I know when I was on my way home from places, I ended up getting in trouble doing things. I don't get any more, of course. But I'd like us to think about defining, and I'm sure you have those conversations, but I hope that we're not here a year later with the same kind of arguments about money versus, okay, these are the outcomes, we're gonna invest in them. We're gonna invest in safety, we're gonna invest in mobility, we're gonna invest in access to jobs and schools, if you will. So,
If I might just add one point, conversation with this at the Washington County Coordinating Committee, for example, on Monday. And, you know, we've seen sort of some of the comments that come from some of the other parts of the region, which is to make sure you don't balance this on our back. But you know, I think a point that is starting to resonate is actually this is a very efficient way to provide high school student transportation. And has a far broader benefit than just getting kids to school, because they have the ability to get into jobs and after school events and all that. And rather than have a sort of beginning to think about Portland as the one-off, wouldn't be more constructive to begin to think about how do we build that kind of system that works for other students in other districts, so that it's not you know, just limited to one part of the geography of the region. And that actually would meet a lot of the other objectives that we hear from our suburban partners about local circulation and access for their citizens to their destinations. So I think there's sort of two ways of coming at this in terms of beginning to think about it. And I encourage that at the regional level to grow the transit infrastructure so that we actually, that this works in more places.
Well, thank you. clean up the discussion really well from the last thing, retreat follow-up, because I think this is really at the heart of some of that, for where we want to go as a board, as an agency, as our future, so good segue, so thank you.
Other questions for Neil on the general manager's report? Okay.
Let's move on then to the streetcar master operating agreement, and operating agreements.
And
Do you want to tee this up?
Quick introduction, Alan Lato will do the main show here. One of the things on our list, and actually, I would think remains on your list, is the relationship between the city of Portland, Portland Streetcar Inc., and Trimet related to the operation of the streetcar. And we've been involved with, I think, some really good and deep conversations with all of the parties over the last year as we're beginning to think about how, frankly, rationalize that agreement that had grown in a fairly ad hoc manner over a series of years. And what's the next step? I don't know that anything that we do right now would be the ultimate outcome, but what's the next step in evolving those relationships? Alan's been our lead in all of those discussions, so I'm pleased he can be here. I would say that one of the key elements that we've got to sort of face here soon is that we do have an expired operating agreement that is sort of on a month-to-month extension right now with the streetcars. So there's the hope is that we have reached something that is an improvement related to the master agreement. Again, next step. And then we also have an obligation to advance the operating agreement, which provides our operating subsidy to the streetcar afresh for the new year. And obviously we'll be opening the east side that Alan will go through that takes on another character. So with that little bit of introduction, I'll turn it over to Alan.
Great, thanks, Nick. Mr. President, members of the board, what I'll do here is, I think I have about 25 minutes. I'll try not to talk the whole time to make sure you all have questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. The plan is I'll do the briefing today, give you as much information as I can. We'll bring it back to the regular board meeting 2 weeks from today and ask you to consider a resolution. The same day the city council is taking up the same agreement. So if all of that comes together, if everybody's comfortable, we can be closing it out by the end of July. And then many more steps well beyond that. This just sets the foundation. What I wanted to do is, actually in front of you, you should have the full text of both agreements. I'm not going to walk you through those. There's time for you to read those if you want to. There's a lot of detail in them. But I do have, I think it's about a 7-page handout that gives a little bit of background on the streetcar in general, which I think is worth going through, and then gives a bit of an outline of the master agreement, which is the more complicated or more complex of the two. I'll also talk about the operations agreement. So the handout here is the one that just has the streetcar map on the front. This is our downtown, Trimet's downtown route map showing MAX buses. And the streetcar is highlighted in green, showing that it really integrates with the full downtown system, the full central city system. And starting September 22nd, that line on the east side will be open and operating. So that it really is, it's a maturing system, it's more of a system, not just a line anymore. And so both has a lot more mobility impacts, but also has the need to take a more comprehensive look at the entire thing. The second page is just the streetcar map itself. It'll show up in schedules and elsewhere. Also showing the dotted line for some future connection across our Milwaukee Bridge to complete what they're calling the loop. If you take a look at the next page, this shows a graph of ridership since about 2005, growing over time with a little bit less during the winter, and that's what you see the most recent dip. In addition to as Trimet's budget and the city's budget has been squeezed, the frequency has been squeezed just a bit. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, I think, in a moment. But you can see very good ridership. If this were a Trimet line exclusively, we would talk about this as the 8th highest ridership line, including MAX. So it would be the 4th highest if we were only looking at it compared to other bus lines. And also, one of the most efficient in terms of cost per ride. It's actually number 5. It's in between the 4 MAX lines and all of our bus lines, including the most efficient frequent service bus lines. This is more efficient in terms of cost per ride and in terms of rides per hour of service that are out on the street. If you look at the next page, these are just sort of simple graphics that show, streetcar is both about mobility, it's also about development, and the development that's occurred around the streetcar line and is planned for and hoped for in the future to continue. There are 2 sort of before and after. One is a picture of the Pearl District and some of the development that's happened. After the streetcar, which the word has been cut off for some reason, but the one on the right on the top shows sort of as you march to the north, the taller buildings are later on as the demand for that area, the development around the streetcar grew. And then the bottom is down by River Place. You can see the kinds of development, the River Place development before the streetcar came in and the kinds of development that were coming in after, and the difference that makes in terms of the demand in the market. Some locations and numbers to sort of back up the conceptual statement of it drawing development. The map on the right side shows a series of locations where development occurred around the streetcar line. This was updated actually a few years ago. And then on the left, showing on the top, the orange bars are the development that was happening before the decision to build a streetcar. The green bars are the development that happened after the decision to build a streetcar. And the sections there are 1 block away from the alignment, 2 blocks away, 3 blocks away, 4 blocks away. And so you can see before the decision to build, development was fairly scattered throughout the central city. After that really organized development and the demand nearest to the streetcar, and this represents the amount of the total allowable development that might happen. That is the height, the density, the amount of economic activity that's happening in those buildings. It was highest closest to the streetcar. The one on the bottom just shows the distance to the streetcar, also again as an organizing after the decision to build. A large proportion of the development was happening very close to the streetcar. And that development matters. It's not just an economic development, and it's not just about housing, it's not just about jobs, so all of those are important. It's also probably worth mentioning that about, in the Pearl District, in the Taylor Creek area, about 22% of those housing units are affordable. So it's not just for one section of the region, it's for a broad cross-section of folks who can take advantage of both the mobility and the development. It also matters in that the kinds of development that has sprung up around streetcar and gets attracted to streetcar here and elsewhere in the country is a very different kind of development. The 2 pie charts at the top are taken from regional data, and we'll have some great updates in the next couple of years from Metro with new information on this. But this shows the difference between areas with relatively with no real mixed use and not as much transit versus those places that are really concentrated with lots of mixed use. And it's not just the growth in transit, although that's substantial. The mode share in transit grows by more than 10 times. But what also matters is the walking trips substantially increase and the biking trips increase. And so it's the kind of development that comes up around a streetcar that makes for greater mobility with less cars on the road, more economic activity with less demand, even on our services and our funds than might otherwise happen if that development were to happen scattered throughout the region.
I just have a question. What's other? Skateboards?
Yeah, it's open. It could literally be skateboards and rollerblades and yeah.
But it's interesting that other is well, I don't know, true, but other declines substantially with good transit. That's which goes exactly to your
Right,
question.
right.
Why is that?
And then just a financial note that in terms of if you take out fares, the cost per ride for streetcar and frequent service bus are roughly equivalent, except that the city pays part of that. So Trimet is not picking up the entire bill for the operations on that. And again, to reiterate that no Trimet capital funds have gone into construction of streetcar so far. And with this agreement, that would continue, as I'll discuss in just a moment. I think what I'll actually do is take these backwards. The master agreement between the city and Trimet is supposed to really formalize what has been a somewhat ad hoc relationship to date. Very entrepreneurial, very much taking advantage of opportunities, very successful in terms of developing a line and now developing a system and engendering the kind of development that we're talking about here. But in terms of some of the decision-making and Trimet's involvement somewhat ad hoc, the original line sort of had gone forward before the exact decision, and Trimet's involvement in operations was entirely clear. And so part of the idea of the master agreement is to kind of set an umbrella agreement, cooperative agreement between the city and Trimet about how we make decisions going forward, and clearly tie in the authority of this board and the city council into those decisions. The operations agreement is more about, well, how do we actually operate it? It's been running for more than 10 years. It needs to continue operating. If we don't have something by the end of August, some kind of updated agreement by the end of August, we actually couldn't continue to operate. And so the operations agreement pulls together what used to be 3 different agreements into a single place and ties up all of those details in a place. These are all operations standards or regular practices that we've been undergoing in the past few years. Nothing groundbreaking here, but it brings it all together and allows us to move forward. It also, not unimportantly, exactly mirrors what you've just adopted in the Trimet budget. There's a reduction in the funding to streetcar compared to what it otherwise would have been. That's commensurate with the reductions that we've had to make in services in general, completely consistent with the FY 2013 budget that we just passed. So I'm not going to go into more detail on the operations agreement unless there are specific questions.
Yes, sir. Help me get out of my confusion.
I'll try.
Try. On page 7 of the draft, point 4, decision-making structure, C.2. PEG exercises authority through the city's ownership of the streetcar system and all its assets, and through Trimet's financing of its operation. Where I get confused in going through this and then trying to look back at page 11, point 5, under 7, financing, operations financing. How does this tie? Trimet, my understanding is, how are we, I guess the question becomes this way, how are we financing the operations? If this is owned by the city has all of the capital, the ownership, how does Trimet's financing really enter into the operations?
Well,
Clarify that a little bit.
it's of a piece with the operation of the streetcar that we've had since the beginning, the partnership of actually operating the streetcar, starting in 2001, where the city and the private business partners were the ones who pulled together the capital to develop it. And then Trimet was brought into the partnership to provide part of the operating. And at the time when we opened it, we were providing approximately 2/3. We brought it down to something close to about half and half between the city and the streetcar. We're still part of that agreement. And so the point here is actually about making sure that the permanent executive group, which Neil would sit on, is not a separate and somehow separately empowered group that can make its own decisions independent of this board and the city council. The point is that the ability of the PEG to coordinate operates through the city's responsibility for capital and our partial responsibility for operating. So the idea here here is that the partnership that has worked to get to this point, the capital side being the cities and the operations being partially Trimet's but not entirely, continues to move forward. That partnership has worked well to date, and that this formalizes the ability to make sure that those decisions, especially from our perspective about our contributions to operations, those decisions are part of our ongoing budget process and part of the decisions that this board has oversight.
Okay, that brings me to my point of perhaps so I got confused. Trimet only funds a part of the operations.
That's correct.
That sentence leads me to think that Trimet finances the operations, not partial. And I'm wondering if that needs to be clear. God forbid, all of us who leaves this table, and I don't want to reference what happened with the school fast, we get blindsided. But your agreement said you finance the operations of. And you might, I don't know, our legal counsel is here. The question is, do we need to have a clarifying statement that it is the Trimet's share of financing operations, so that there will be no uncertainty after this is signed that we're not financing the entire operations of streetcar.
I think it's fair point, and I think the whole thing is really built on that, that's an understanding, but we should be able to make that clear.
So I'd be happy to take a closer look at that and make sure that kind of comports with what's on page 12 and 13, where it's talking about specific shares, where it does get into the details of the partnership between the two, where Trimet never takes on the full 100%.
If I could just sort of interject, that part of the answer to your question too is why is Trimet involved in history? And the original justification for Trimet involvement in the operation was that these were areas that we needed to serve in any case as sort of regional transit provider. For example, as the Pearl District and other South Waterfront developed, we had to service them. And yet there were going to be a lot of people, a lot of transit demand. So it was reasonable to try to be part of that solution, not the entire reason, but reasonable to be part of it. And I think what this is trying to do is now sort of grow that understanding into a more formal structure that then is a plateau from which other understanding continues. Could you maybe just walk through the other bits of the master agreement and get into, but I know will be a ton of questions.
Sure. Well, and if I can follow on Dr. Beth's point, it's a really good one. But I also notice on page 11 of the master agreement, 5D, is where it talks about the need to find other sources of funding, which is, for the streetcar, which is absolutely true. I'm a little bit concerned, and again, I want to explore a little bit how this affects priorities, because I also personally feel that that's something that we need to do for the Trimet system itself. And I wouldn't want to see language in here which would somehow give the streetcar priority to new sources. And so can you talk a little bit about how this agreement is crafted to make sure that we can continue assigning priority to Trimet operations while still doing what we can to help the streetcar? I don't want it to get flipped.
Right.
So maybe if I could just, with the segue to that question, just ask Alan to sort of step through the key points of the whole agreement and make sure that point's covered.
So make sure I cover that, but I'll try to give the sort of overview here. Basically, the concept here is that the streetcar has been extremely advantageous in terms of its mobility impacts, its development, and that the partnership has worked well, but needs a little maturing, especially with the line now being a system as of a couple of months from now. And so this sets up a series of expectations about how we work together. And one of the things in there is the permanent executive group, which I'll touch on. But it basically sets sort of four basic impacts One that, in terms of decision-making around streetcar projects and future streetcar commitments of any sort, including operations, that it sets the Trimet and the city on equal footing and clearly invests the responsibility, the ultimate authority in this board and in the city council. That our budget process that the board has to adopt and has control over is a guiding document in this. We can't do anything that goes outside of our budget, just the same as the city can't go outside of their budget process. In terms of capital responsibilities, the responsibility for replacement of the current system and any new investments, should there be any, are firmly placed on the city so that that's not a potential future capital replacement liability or capital liability for Trimet. In terms of the operations, the partnership continues, but for lines that are successful, there would be thresholds beyond which we would then go into a process to increase the share of Trimet's contribution up to a possible amount where the city is still providing 15% of the after fares, after streetcar revenue paid for portion. So that the city would always have a role in paying operations, but as those lines become more and more successful in terms of ridership and in terms of development, that Trimet would take on the portion that we're able to do with operations. The city would continue to focus on the development and on the capital maintenance of the system. It also more formally ties the streetcar decision-making process into the regional decision-making process, especially, for example, with the East Side streetcar, which is the first line that had to go for federal FTA funding, that had to go through a regional process. Decision-making at JPAC, decision-making at the Metro Council, where the entire region gets a say in what happens, and that recognizes the need to be this for streetcar as well. In the future then, clearly the Trimet board and therefore our adopted budget would be to allow for any additional development that happens under the streetcar agreement. If that did not happen, then no projects would go forward under this agreement. The streetcar is not treated with any special status ahead of frequent service bus, so that our frequent service bus restoration, which is, we've talked about as a real priority as we get resources back to be able to restore. The streetcar could be raised commensurately with that, but not beyond that. It also, since this is an issue right now about fare policy, with streetcar now introducing a fare on the entire line for the first time in September, when they haven't done that before. It also calls for streetcar fares to be seamless to riders, but not necessarily exactly the same. It just says it has to be understandable and seamless to the riders.
What is that?
It really means that you don't buy a ticket on one, complete your ride, and then have to start the whole process over with a completely new ticket and no recognition of the need to transfer or the integration of the two systems. So for instance, when we implement electronic fare someday in the future, we'll make sure that it's compatible with the streetcar system so that people can still continue to use the two as a single transit system.
But you said that the fares don't have to be
Doesn't
the same.
necessarily mean that the fares need to be the same. For instance, right now, starting in September, if you board the streetcar and pay a streetcar-only fare, you'll have to pay additional to get on a Trimet vehicle because they're charging significantly less than we will.
But if you buy a Trimet ticket, you'll be able to rent the streetcar at no addition.
With no sort of barrier to transfer. We want these to be as integrated as possible.
Question.
Yeah, go ahead.
What's the solution or direction that we're going if I get on Trimet with a full ticket, just trying to get some clarity? I can transfer a streetcar with no additional charges. But if I get on streetcar first and I transfer to Trimet, then am I going up and having to pay the Trimet fee?
if you sort of accidentally buy the streetcar only fare, then you would pay an upcharge to get to a Trimet line. But the streetcar will sell a Trimet valid fare at a Trimet price, so that you could make all of those transfers without any barriers. Neil touched on this, but it's worth mentioning why we're taking this now. A couple of things. One, the operations agreement does need to be updated. That's got a clear timeline on it. The master agreement is really about the need to recognize the maturation of the system and the continuing questions about capital liability, and how we deal with operating funds, how it integrates with our budget process, and the ability to put the city and Trimet together at a single table where these issues are discussed and then coordinated between the board and the mayor council. This is a real opportunity to be able to set the whole framework in place to make sure that the decision-making is sort of still able to take advantage of some of the entrepreneurial basis, but very much rational and tied into our budget process and the city budget process. With that, I think I'd just switch over to answering questions. I didn't want to go into a whole lot of other detail unless you do.
What kind of questions?
Unfortunately, several.
Okay, that's fine. This is good.
And I really appreciate the effort to bring this together. I think it's been needed for a long time, and I think that the work over the last year has been very purposeful and very good. But I do have some remaining questions that I think are not dealt with here and either need to be spoken to as something yet to be decided in the next year, or certainly by the date set, I don't think it'll be decided in the next week or two. The issues that I'd like to raise are many. One is streetcars is a city service. It is primarily driven by the city council. While we have two representatives, and the city council has two representatives, one additional representative will be Portland Streetcar Inc., which is appointed by the city council, right? So then
The board.
yeah, so actually it'll be a 3-2 vote. I realize we want to reach this by consensus, but a major point isn't about how many representatives there are, but is for us in this agreement to understand more than it specifies, which is only on page 14. This is largely a city of Portland service, yet it does really influence the operation of Trimet. I mean, we have certain sums of money going to that, and as a result, from time to time, it will influence our regional transit provisions beyond the city of Portland. And I think the city council needs to understand that. Yet, I don't think that the priorities of the agreement acknowledge that, because what it talks about primarily is development and mobility, and I would suspect that's development and mobility within the city of Portland. It doesn't speak to connectivity, although I think that's implied with Trimet, connectivity to Trimet system. But I think that needs to be more stipulated. I think that needs to be more emphasized. The reason why that's important is that there's lots of regional residents and regional businesses that rely on connectivity into Portland and outside. And so connectivity, I think, needs to be further emphasized. Ridership, I think, needs to be emphasized. And I think we speak to in the chart ridership, but I don't see that ridership is a priority, whereas development and mobility is a priority. So if our goal is to increase ridership, and by doing so, that gets fewer of the people that are the other. That's maybe facetious here, but I do think we manage Trimet not for solely for development, not solely for mobility. We manage it to increase ridership. We spend a lot of time thinking about ridership numbers. So I think the agreement should talk to connectivity and ridership. Ultimately, the issue of locals with Portland versus regional needs, in my opinion, to be further considered or addressed than simply one statement on page 14, which says, item B on page 14, for the lines that extend beyond the city of Portland limits, ownership, maintenance, capital, and operating funding will be determined for each line by the project partners involved. We almost entered a frying pan and it not the fire. We were in the frying pan. We were almost in the fire as it relates to the city of North Oswego expansion of the streetcar. Yet, while we were a participant in those discussions, I don't think it was very well considered in terms of who operates it, who makes the decisions. At some point, not by August 1st, but by some date certain, I think there should be, within the master agreement, some further work done to evaluate expansion beyond the city of Portland limits. And I think that's going to keep us out of the fire, but it will also provide for more emphasis on connectivity and ridership. While we speak to the purpose of the consensus-based decision-making, I'm not sure that the agreement, the draft master agreement, possibly the intergovernmental agreement, speaks to the fact, what if people can't agree, or Trimet and the city of Portland and the sole representative from Portland Streetcar do not reach agreement? Does it become a 3-2 vote? Or is consensus on the requirement? And if consensus is not reached, how do you reach consensus? And maybe we just do that by being good partners, which until a couple weeks ago we didn't generally agree.
And certainly the intention, not to cut you off, but the intention there is that consensus rules. We didn't want to go too far into a lot of decision-making with the PEG because we didn't want to make it seem like it's a separate body that has its own authority outside of the board and the city council. But the intention is that nothing gets out of there unless both parties can agree.
It's sort of like a bunch of kids going to play baseball in the field. One brings the ball, one brings the bat, everybody brings the mitt. You can't play baseball unless everybody chooses to stay there with their ball and bat. But at some point, it'd be good to understand that. The issue of operator role, I know that the city of Portland is supposed to fund the construction, expansion, and call the operator through Portland Streetcar. Yet, are we not providing drivers? Are we not providing scheduling services?
If they request, as a consultant, we can provide that.
Okay, so that's probably spoken to in this agreement, but I wonder if the roles and conditions, operator, we're regionally seen as the operator of transit, maybe just sort of misunderstood. So I guess I would ask for these clarifications to be further addressed going forward, and that if there's agreement and they're important consideration, which I think there is, that there be a date certain by which they're incorporated in an addendum to this agreement, so that we find ourselves in the ability to manage both the regional transit system and our participation in Portland Streetcar Inc. in a connected ridership-based way. I think this is a policy issue that's of great importance, for at least this board. How much of our role in streetcar and its expansion is a result of our payroll tax revenues, which have the ability to go up? Because we should know that, because on a regional policy basis, this board being a regional policy setting board, if the region is subsidizing what is generally today an exclusive Portland transit service streetcar, which doesn't have a priority based upon connectivity and ridership, then the region is losing on the subsidy and the payroll tax. It's not making any sense. So the region's payroll tax employers pay for Trimet tax. A portion of that is going to streetcar, but there isn't an emphasis on ridership and connectivity to the rest of the region. Then that subsidy isn't as beneficial to the employers of the region who are not in Portland as it otherwise, I think, could or should be. So I'd like us to know that as a board, but I'd also, that ties back into that connectivity and ridership. That if the regions out of Portland employers are paying for portion is they should know what ridership benefits and connectivity benefits and priorities they get.
If I could just not to respond, because I think actually all of those are good points, and all of those points have come up, and I think are very consistent with the threads of conversation that led to this agreement. So I don't see any trouble in terms of our conversations as far as Center City staff related to all of that. Related to the last point, and we can certainly do the numbers, but one of the things for you is we're certainly talking about ridership, but we're also talking about development, and development brings with it a certain level of payroll tax development as well. And so we have talked about that one-to-one link between the development that occurs and is organized around the streetcar, its payroll tax potential, and how that then is a positive feedback to the transit system in terms of ridership and the other things that you mentioned. So, I mean, those are all very key threads. And I think one of the things, when you sort of look at all of our partners around the region, there will be different strategies that they'll all want to follow related to their development and how transit affects that. And it's our role to work with that. In the city of Portland, they do see the organizing principle of the streetcar as a key to their being able to maintain or absorb some large proportion of the region's growth in population in the years ahead. So they are not building more streets. There's not going to be another Burnside. There's not going to be another Sandy. So the only way they can get to that is with better transit and land use alternatives together. So that's why this is an important statement for the city.
My comments are not criticisms. They're trying to say how can we make what we intend to achieve denoted or clarified even more fully, so people will say, I get what you're doing, I see how you're going to do it, and this will be the result. And to the extent that the regional transit agency, Trimet, I think those employers outside of the region have a stake in it, and should sort of understand it as well. But I'm very supportive of streetcars, so.
I would just note, I think that the idea of doing an addendum and a date certain is a great idea, because this is new. And so, one thing is sort of seeing just how important, and we need to make some adjustments and make course corrections. I'm very much into the continuous improvement mode when it comes to tracks.
So my greatest concern goes along right along with what Steve was saying in regards to kind of an outsized contribution in regards to what we're doing with the streetcar. You know, and this might sound a little blasphemous from the folks that I represent, but I think the streetcar could have a significant impact on our region positively, even outside the city of Portland, and even out to the fringes and to the edges, because ultimately the opportunity that we have to, and if the data, I say if because I haven't had the opportunity to really take a look at this information and qualify it, but if the streetcar has had the impact that we're seeing here with a significant increase in density, that allows for a number of folks who would live outside the Portland region now live inside the Portland region and have opportunities to live within walking distance and riding distance, and then ultimately mass transit distance from where they live and work, which actually reduces the overall burden of businesses and individuals' property taxes and improving roads, those things that would continually get used if not for having the streetcar and the development that it spurred. And so I certainly see some significant benefit even for the region that I represent in regards to having the streetcar. But those benefits need to be measured and balanced by exactly what Steve mentioned last in regards to there should not be some outsized contribution or subsidy, coming from the businesses and individuals outside the region, outside the Portland specific, Portland proper, contributing towards the operation of the streetcar. But I certainly don't have any problem with, looking at the streetcar as an additional opportunity for Trimet to extend its services without having to pay for it, without having the capital responsibility to build it, and then based on what I've read, it's still Portland's responsibility to maintain it, and I know it's not our asset, but basically we chip in a little bit on the operations, and we get, I think some significant benefit for Trimet, but then also for the region that I feel I don't have any concerns about that component. It's just, how do we make sure that we're we're not getting an outsized contribution towards the streetcar. That's not in comparison to what we're delivering to the rest of the communities.
A very fair point. And one thing that Alan really didn't mention, as we've developed this, one of our key sort of guiding principles is, could you just take this and scratch Portland and put it in Gresham or put it in Hillsborough? And that's, obviously you can't quite do that, but nonetheless, that's been one of the guiding principles, is that this would be a template that can be used in other communities, other parts of the region. And I agree with you that it's really had the effect of actually growing the resource in the transit. When you think about this service now being provided half or subsidized half by non-Trimet sources, and all the capital and all the replacement coming in from non-Trimet sources, then we can really grow the pie, as one of our congressmen often says, related to transit resources.
One other question in regards to the streetcar. Have we reduced any of our services to these areas of the streetcar? I know we talked about that we didn't have the services down to South Waterfront, and so in that regard, we didn't increase, capital expenditures and those things to service the South Waterfront. And were there any other reductions that we did when we added the streetcar?
I don't really think so. I think we have reorganized various places. I know the 77 and some of the other routes through the Northwest have been reorganized in various parts of town to take advantage, frankly, of the connectivity issues that Steve was, but I think in that,
We can bring a little more information back before the next meeting, but there certainly were some trends in the bus service, partially because people were moving to streetcar and the development was happening around that.
and for example, on the 15 from Northwest 23rd, you can see some reduction in ridership when the old streetcar alternative to get to downtown became available as well.
Thoughts or comments or questions? I guess I just want to say, good piece of work. I agree, this is something that's needed to get done sometime, and put some kind of sideboards around this. But I also want to say I agree with many of the comments that have been made here about this is an opportunity to get this tool, maybe not specifically for streetcar, but maybe for other things in other parts of the region. And it does set up a good, kind of model about how we might want to look at doing some innovative things in some of the other areas of the region. And so I think it's a good start. I did hear some really good comments here today. Steve, you had some really good comments. Dr. Bethel, you had a comment or suggestion. So I guess I'm looking to you folks whether you believe we need to be ready to make any of those changes and bring it back 2 weeks from now.
I believe we can fine tune
Okay.
to the comments that I've heard, and part of it may be per Morgan McCart's notion is that we simply embed that we're going to come back and look at this with, look at a menu of things that we want to make sure are working right and further define.
Maybe
and-
one way to do that might be to have a line in there saying, by a certain date, by consideration of these issues and stipulate what they are. So we have memory and commitment that they will be considered and addressed. What the outcome will be will be judged later. Otherwise, we'll lose our memory.
Yeah, and I think it's also good as a building block. I've always sort of seen this as a plateau, and there will be other changes that we'll think about over time. This is not a fully baked solution. Yeah.
So let's come back to us with a cover resolution on that. So maybe that's kind of language we put in the resolution before we, as part of the action we take. I like that. That's very good. You guys are, I think people nodding their heads around here, that sounds good. And again, congratulations to all the staff working on this. I know this wasn't easy. Sure took a number of hours. And I know you have some of the old timers that used to work on this stuff, helping everything out there. So pass on thanks to them too. Okay. All right, thank you. Good. Let's go on to the fare mitigation program. I'm glad to see what's way over here. We'll talk a bit more about this program. We should really a little bit more.
Just to give John Allen a very quick introduction as he gets his materials here going. You did provide direction to set aside $1 million fare mitigation program. We've been working really hard to try to put the details of that together. really, this is a check-in with you on work in progress, and sort of make sure that you agree we're on the right course, or give us some guidance about others that we should be working with, or other things that should be done related to this program. I also see that, well, we want to have as much of this in place for September 1st, and we'll do that. It will continue to be a work in progress, just given the calendar, the time, and continue to qualify over a period of time. So with that, we'll do an introduction. Right.
Good morning, President. Like a flag. Should do that again. President Warner, members of the board, General Manager McFarland. For the record, my name is John Bell, Director of Diversity and Transit Equity. And this morning, as is always my pleasure, I have the distinct pleasure of giving you a quick update on where we are with implementing mitigation strategies that you all have directed us to do on June 27th. When thinking about how to focus the mitigation program, it's important to keep in mind our Title VI guidance when focusing on the most in need. Low income is defined as any person whose median household income is at or below the Department of Health and Human Services poverty guidelines. These guidelines are used across the region, as we all know, to establish criteria for affordable housing, students qualifying for free and reduced lunch, and other services. You'll remember from previous briefings that Trimet, like many urban districts our size, have high percentages of low-income riders. 35% of our overall ridership earn less than $20,000 per year. We also have a very diverse ridership. Roughly 25% of our riders are minority, and of those, 52% are transit dependent, compared to 39% non-minority. To further illustrate that, the map shown here, we've all seen this before. I like to bring it back because I think it really helps illustrate both the challenge as well as I think our opportunity with this mitigation. This map denotes poverty density per census tract within Trimet Service District. As you can see, it's across the board with special concentration in East Multnomah County and Western Washington County. So, when thinking about the mitigation, I want to make an important note that this no wet well will be a silver bullet. As we know, the need will probably outmatch the contribution. But working collectively with our partners and identifying creative solutions, we are in a position to help the most amount of people possible with the contingency amount authorized by the board. To that end, there are 3 ways we are exploring when implementing the board's guidance. The first, expand Trimet's current commission program to include organizations serving low-income populations to an amount that is meaningful. Increase the percentage from 5% to an amount that is meaningful, my correction. The second is work with our government partners to explore leveraging opportunities. I realize that topic wasn't considering our backdrop here, but there are some wonderful conversations that have already occurred that are underway. We are in conversations with DHS, we are in conversations with Multnomah County, and are in conversations with the City of Portland's Housing Bureau to look at how we might be able to use some of these funds to leverage and get bigger bang for our buck. We all realize that we share both clients and customers, either through our health and social service network, and they all oftentimes ride Trimet services in order to get to those services. Yes.
Given what we see on the map, have you also had conversations with Washington County clients?
Yes, yes.
Anything, possibility of working there?
Yes, in fact, I'll hand you a list in a second that will show you some of the groups that we've been talking about in Washington County. And lastly, exploring the possibility of implementing a mini grant program to help organizations serving populations not served through the nonprofit program, which I think will probably be the best opportunity in terms of the expansion of the convention program. I should note that Trimet is not alone when considering how to limit fair cost impacts on vulnerable populations. Similar efforts exist in several of our agency partners across the United States. In fact, I was back for vacation in Dallas, had an opportunity to meet with DART. They have implemented similar strategies. I think all agencies, including us, realize the enormity of this challenge and wanting to find opportunities of really running the impact of fare increases on most vulnerable populations. The month of July has and will be a busy one, of course, as the General Manager pointed out. Tomorrow we'll be hosting a meeting with a cross-section of nonprofit and community-based partners. And in fact, I have a list here of invited participants. This will not be the only opportunity for folks to weigh in, but it certainly will be the most formal opportunity to help us think through this. I'll wait till this is around there. So the real goal is of this conversation that Concordia University has graciously offered their space up. We'll ask them to weigh in on the 3 mitigation areas mentioned here and make a recommendation that will then bring back to the General Manager and then to the board on an appropriate percentage target. I've also had conversations with Director Saragosa and Director Bethel on who we ought to include in terms of ensuring that we have the most diverse participants across the board and on the 3 areas as well. We'll finalize a nonprofit agreement which has a number of controls in place to ensure organizations are certified 501c3 entities, that they record who they disperse fares to, and that they maintain records for at least 3 years. In addition to exploring leveraging opportunities, a similar conversation will occur with our government partners. Because the percentage may be significantly larger that is present, we will ask our partners to redirect the money that they will save back into purchasing more fares for their clients. In August, the Department of Diversity and Transit Equity, in partnership with Customer Service, will offer a training to organizations enrolled in the program on how to order and process their fare requests in preparations of September's implementation. As mentioned, there are several conversations underway with our jurisdictional partners. We anticipate these conversations to continue as we work to identify and explore longer-term leveraging opportunities. We'll keep the board abreast of our progress, and I'll be back continuously. I know I'll be back in a few weeks to give you another update. With that, I'll take any questions you may have. Thank you.
I would just like to comment and thank you for moving this so quickly. I know we have timelines, and I do appreciate the quick work and response that has occurred. And as you said, this is not a silver bullet, but it's a beginning. And I just think that this conversation will continue to, it's not a one-time thing. I think that we really do need to recognize that. But I think this is something that will continue to go forward, and that we definitely need to make sure that we keep it on the table so that it can go forward. So thank you for your hard work.
Go to you first.
Just quickly, the Department of Health and Human Services, the poverty guidelines, are those adjusted state by state, or is that just a national number?
They are just a state by state.
And so is that something that we're going to utilize in regard, and as we look at who's going to be able to access this level?
Director Stoll, what you'll see in the coming weeks when we take a look at our application that we'll ask our nonprofit partners to complete, one of the guidelines is that they in fact serve customers, consumers, clients that are within those poverty guidelines. And what we tend to use and borrow the language of is Housing Authority of Portland, which I realize they've changed the name, which is hard to keep up with organizations. Don't date myself. And that's one of the specific guidelines. It's a widely used guidelines. One of the things that makes the most sense for transit districts is we have similar guidelines through Title VI, which also, as you'll remember, in past weeks when we brought forth our equity analysis, one of the things we take a look at are poverty poverty impacts. And that's one of the guidelines that we use as well, is poverty precincts based on the same definitions.
And one quick final question in regards to this map. I think you previously you showed us a map of the historical perspective. Is there the opportunity to get that? I don't think I still have it.
Oh, absolutely.
In comparison to what we're looking at here.
Sure.
Because we talked about the movement of poverty, which will give us some good insight in regards to ensuring that if there's organizations that we know of in these specific regions that may or may not be connected, either directly to Trimet or through one of these organizations, then we can make sure that we touch base with them.
Absolutely. I'll make sure we do that.
Do we have that presentation posted on the web?
I'm not sure if it's posted on the web, but we have it right now.
So, a scenario, if a qualified community member goes to one of our participating agencies, are they receiving a pass, are they receiving a ticket, are they fully receiving at no cost a card or a pass, or is that how it works?
It varies. Many of the community-based partners, specifically the ones that will be asking to participate in conversations tomorrow, are currently purchasing fares for their clients. They receive those funds from a variety of sources. Some are through the contracts that they have with counties. Others are through contracts that they have with the state, with the goal of having their clients be able to access the services, because these folks don't drive. And so in many instances they do. And so I think our goal is to help them be able to continue that level of services. In many instances, purchase more from us.
Is there a way, my question isn't to suggest that someone would not do that, but is there a way in your agreements with them to require, have some stipulation that this doesn't go to staffing per se? I realize staffing, if we're very successful, this is going to put a load on their service delivery. But what I'm hoping is that the commission that we offer results in opportunities for increased ridership assistance versus a benefit to an organization, which I realize it has to be carefully said because they're doing some of the work and that comes at a cost.
That's right. We do have language in the agreement that you'll see that specifically requires the organizations that participate in this agreement to reallocate the funds back into purchasing more fares, and not, for instance, into the general fund.
That's true.
And that's a conversation we also will have with our government partners. We also don't want them to contribute to
That's
general
true.
funds. And that conversation may manifest in IGA or some sort of agreement, because the percentage will probably be much higher than what it currently is.
So presently, our program provides for, in dollar terms, if you will, how much, a dollar figure, the participants presently are providing service in dollars, let's say $10 million, $5 million?
I think it's at the tune of $2 million, and the impact to us is roughly, I think, 150,000.
So our contribution of $1 million, does it double the program's service delivery? Is that what, or does it increase it by tenfold?
Well, there are a couple ways of answering that question. So we currently have a list of organizations that we will want to conclude. What we will additionally do is expand that list. And if we expand the percentage, it will both increase the amount of folks who currently participate, but also expand the amount it costs Trimet in order to use it.
So what I'm gonna get to is that, so let's say that presently there's $1 million in current passes being purchased through the program, and we're going to add another $1 million. That doubles our service to those in need. If we take that 1 million, that's gonna buy about 33,000 rides at $250 ride per month. Is that fair statement? I divided a million.
Just say yes.
Social science major here.
So, and I'm a liberal arts journalist. But I learned how to manage a business. So what I did is I divided 1 million by 250, and then divided it by 12, and came up with 33,000 rides.
Okay.
So if we imagine that we're doing, not every month, but 10 million rides a month, that's 1/3 of 1% of our ridership is going to be benefited by that 1 million, which yet 57% of our, whatever percentage is people under $20,000, or a significant percentage. My point is that we can use this as a social service marketing opportunity for Washington County, Clackamas County, and other partners to do just what you said, which is a great concept of leverage, to suggest that by them working with us, we can utilize their dollars with existing social service agencies, not start something new, but leverage the impact far more effectively than we might try to do it independently. So I really congratulate you on that concept of leverage. But I'd like you to think about how do you say, while the board has, with Consuelo's leadership, committed $1 million, it is a minute amount when you consider the overall issue that we're trying to deal with. But by working together in a leveraged way, we can actually grow that very substantive decision to a far further level.
Absolutely.
So I think you have a great marketing opportunity with agencies. Tell them how little it's going to be, but how important it is, and you won't know. Other questions?
Thank you, good work. I guess, Consuelo, are we heading the right way?
Hey, as far as I can see.
That's what I want to hear. We'll look forward to your further reports after your meeting with these folks.
Right.
And I hope we can leverage some other resources to really make this do more. So congratulations and good luck.
Right.
I plan to see, be a part of the meeting too.
Great. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
All right. Okay, the last one is the board retreat follow-up, and I see my name behind this agenda item. So I will try, you've got 10 minutes, and I'll try to make this brief. You have, I think, in front of you, the summary, real high-level summary was put together, I believe, by our staff, the facilitator was at a meeting. And then staff has also attached a document which was meant to start a discussion on the third issue that's there. But for Consuelo, since you weren't there, I just want to let you know you missed a really good session, opportunity for us to really talk with one another about a number of issues. And what came out of that retreat was, I think, number one, and there's 3 issues here you see. Number one might not be titled entirely correct, and jump in here, Steve, if you want to on this one. But what I think we heard the board say was, we need to really work on improving the public's trust and knowledge about Trimet. And to do that, there's, I think, all of these things that are noted under here, under the bullets, are things that we need to do to be successful in that. And that was, we had a good discussion. We started talking about kind of the future and some of the changes we see that we want to move forward with, and where the strategic direction for the agency should be. And frankly, I think we wanted to get out of the weeds somewhat and focus at a higher level and get us going the right way. So that was the first one. The second one was, the other thing that the board really talked about a lot was just, we need a financial strategy and plan. What we see now is the resources, the picture is not a lot better for the next, 2 or 3 years. We don't know, but we're hoping things are going to pick up, but we really need to spend some time at that, and we needed to really develop a financial strategy plan. We needed to figure out kind of the ways to look at leveraging new resources and just thinking about some of the liabilities and things that we have right now. And then the last thing was talking about just how we can better operate as a board in our board meetings to be more efficient, frankly, to deal with some of the issues that come up on a regular basis. And also, I think, improve the civility of the meetings so that we're, again, we're in partnership with folks most of the time who are providing input to us. So to that end, when we left, we said, let's assign some people to actually, people volunteered to do various things. This item number 2 on the financial strategy, Craig Prosser and Tiffany Schweitzer agreed to essentially chair that group. And they've been the rock stars, and I think you received, have they received the report, all the board received the report from this group? I know I've seen
The minutes.
the minutes.
I think we attach it to one of the Friday updates that you have.
Okay.
So, if not, we can certainly do it again.
I would encourage you to read it, because they are off and running. I guess I would turn to you if there's anything you want to say quickly about the efforts you've got.
You know, we had a great first meeting, I would just include Beth,
Yeah.
obviously, in that she's tremendous help in helping to lead us. And we want to make this something that's easier for people to understand, the audience to understand. It is such, it's complicated, and there's a lot to it, and it's changing year to year, so that's our goal.
And what we've talked about doing, number one, we recalled from the retreat that we wanted something within the next 6 months. So we basically are targeting the end of the calendar year. What we think our responsibility is to kind of come up with a proposal plan for a way to proceed, bring that back to the board, and then the board would sign off on that. So one of the questions we had was how to communicate what we're doing as a subcommittee to the board, and the thing that we talked about is sharing with you copies of our minutes. And if that works for everybody, then we're off and running to proceed. We're talking about putting together, building on the financial forecast I think that exists, really looking at it, building the most likely scenario of where we're gonna be in the next 5 to 10 years. Once we get that, then look to see, one of the things that we often get is, we have read these discussions, as we will know from our recent experiences, don't raise fares, don't cut services, don't, fences sort of built. And so what we wanna do is, okay, if you try to address the problem that we will identify in our most likely projection, on the revenue side only, what does that mean for fares? What does that mean for new revenue sources? What not? So that kind of puts one curve on the question. If you try to, conversely, if you try to address it simply by controlling expenditures, okay, then what does that mean basically for services? And so that puts the other boundary. And then it will be up to the board to identify where we want to be in there, and therefore what kind of strategies do we need to develop long-term to address those issues. And we expect that there'll be some policy recommendations that we'll need to think about. I mean, what should be the percentage of fare recovery? That's one that we've been talking about. What kinds of new revenue sources might be needed? Definitely, what do we do with union bargaining? Some of those union issues. What do we do about our post-employment benefits? And that's what we need to do. What's our strategy for addressing that issue? And so help basically bring back structure then that the board can feed into and come out of that. Okay, this is our marching orders for ourselves, for our staff.
We think these are long-term.
Yes, this is not going to be done or solved in 6 months.
Yeah, so I think the reports you're giving are just wonderful. They give me an indication of what you're doing. Again, making the first group look bad here in terms of how hard you've succeeded as a matter of fact. So other questions?
The information that you referred to being sent out or attached, you resend that again after that, okay?
So then on the first item, the kind of the public trust and knowledge, as pointed out here, kind of the strategic direction and so on. Just in time delivery, Steve and I spent some time this morning really talking about this for a while. And we think this is again, also an effort that needs to get started immediately as the board talk with you about some of the staff that we engage. Steve, did you want to talk a little bit about some of the things we kind of job on about this morning, which I thought was very.
Peer pressure was
Yeah.
enormous.
Yes, right.
We were actually concluding our meeting by texting during this meeting. We'll provide a brief summary anyway. The board, beginning about 2 years ago, I think, took an initial stab at strategic planning, and to the extent that at that time it was not deemed to be as high of a priority, I think we sort of began working on this as a staff facilitated process, and then as we reached crisis over the last several months, we've really put that reasonably so and appropriately so on the back burner. In the board retreat, our conversations about how to achieve outcomes of reestablishing and growing public trust, public knowledge of Trimet, and this is not for marketing purposes, it's really for strategic engagement purposes. I think that was the commitment of the board. We want the public to be engaged and trusting Trimet, and you do that by not only delivering great service at an affordable, effective price, but by having knowledge and engagement. So what we talked about today was beginning with an initial core group of say, Bruce, myself, and some staff that was most appropriate. We established some benchmarking in addition to the work, for example, that Eric has already done around strategic planning, but established some benchmark knowledge around public perception and knowledge of Trimet. We saw some of that related to Adam Davis's report to us. We know that we measure customer satisfaction frequently with Trimet, but to be able to move the agency forward in terms of service delivery minus so many crises, some of which are financial, some of which are lack of understanding or a variety of priorities that we may not as a board understand or share. It seems to us that by knowing more about what the public's perceptions, attitudes are, we will be able to both inform the board as to where we are now and how to get to where we want to be, which is have a higher level of customer confidence, satisfaction. And it's not that it's not good now, it needs to be higher. And by having strategic planning tools that seek to grow public knowledge and engagement and trust, we think that we will grow the great service capacity that Trimet already has and build on that. So the outcome isn't trust. The purpose of doing this isn't specifically trust building. Trust building will be the outcome. The purpose is to continue to elevate the performance of Trimet and knowledge of the public and engagement.
Yeah, I think also, Steve, we talked about in order to do that, we'll start talking about getting out of the box a little bit in terms of how we actually engage the public and our stakeholders. It doesn't continue to kill our general manager, frankly. I think we look at some of the new ways.
That really includes service.
It does. It does. Definitely includes.
Neil's been phenomenal in that regard. The other is that this initial effort of the core group needs to be expanded as for to the purpose of full strategic planning. That it's owned by the board and all of Trimet. But the agency is embodied in this. It isn't just a handful of people.
So that's about the limits of our discussion today, but it was good. Steve and I are on the same wavelength in terms of moving forward. So again, I look forward to conversations with you and some of your staff and how we can help move this forward. Maybe by the next time have a dialogue on this, we'll be able to give you a schedule and kind of some of the major components that we think we need to work on to get us there. Kind of very similar to what you folks have done. So we'll follow your template on that. Okay. So questions of the board for Steve and myself? Okay. Consuelo, did that help you understand a little bit more what went on?
Yes, absolutely, it sounded like it was really good.
It was, and that's all right. Well, I think everything we decided is we We also need to use some of these sessions as opportunities to talk about some of these issues a bit more, rather than just focusing on some of the day-to-day business of the organization. So with that, I'm gonna transition to the last two pages here that are attached to this, just to encourage you to take a look at this. This is the first time they've seen this, right? Okay, so I won't go through this in detail. I encourage you to read this. But the staff has done a good job of trying to capture some of the comments we made in our retreat, which is to take better advantage of the time we have in our briefings here, which is, for example, we wanted, as I said, maybe use this to invite some experts or people, who are engaged in the community to talk to us about issues of common concern, low-income litigation, one to really talk about. So take a look at that. And again, this is, if you have comments, please get them to me or me, and we can amend this some more. The business meetings themselves, I think the other thing that I heard from the second bullet there, Consuelo, was all of the folks really said that we want to make sure that all the board members have an opportunity to provide just an explanation if they feel that they'd like to, of why they're voting one or the other. So I want to make sure that when we take action, that all of us have an opportunity to really state any opinions or thoughts before they actually take action. Again, same way here, we'll bring people in as we need to. I think the public comment discussion is important. I think this is one we need to think about carefully. I think we could, for example, eliminate all testimony on resolutions, because there's no requirement really to do that, and do it on ordinances, and then use the public forum, out like we have after the district. I think that's what this is suggesting here, is a way to speed things up and actually help us move forward. But I don't want to stifle any discussion on important resolutions. So that's one that I think you might want to just think about, and maybe have some thoughts there. We can call on that. Then there's some other discussion on the public forum itself, which is trying to, again, make it clear that we'd like to have testimony written, and that we said if people are belligerent or just, threatening or disrupting the proceedings, we need to really take clear action to eliminate that and discontinue, ask them to discontinue it, or, to close the meeting. Everything was board workshops. I think what we also heard is the board meetings, the briefings, and other things, there's an opportunity we ought not lose sight of, which is to move our meetings around into other areas of the metro region. So again, we have an opportunity to meet some of the folks out there, and also hear from some of the folks that maybe we don't hear from on a regular basis. So that's one of the things hopefully we can start doing on a more regular basis, is get out into the community. And the other one, which I think is under board committees, which I think is one where I'd love some input. We talked about the existing committees, the finance and audit committees, and the committee on assessment and transportation. But we talked about maybe the need to have an executive committee, and I think beyond where the board talked about, but maybe this is the officers of the board, which could deal with things like evaluations of staff, the general manager, annual evaluations. This could be one where we have a dialogue about compensation, as an example, of the staff, and any of those types of issues. And maybe even getting into strategic direction, agenda setting, and other things. I think this could be a good group. So this is one I think, I felt that there was an agreement, we need something like this, and I just look for your thoughts on that one. And if you want to talk to me now, that's great, but if you also want to give me some thoughts on that one later, that would be very good. And I guess the last thing is just, again, making it clear that we want to hear from the public. We're going to try to do as much as we can to get things out to people as early as possible. So this was trying to capture the dialogue that we had at the retreat. I hope it did a pretty good job. I think it did do a pretty good job, but there is a couple, policy issues and just kind of the way we operate that I think that we need to think about carefully before we lock them open. I think that's the general thought. So I guess comments questions, especially comments from folks who maybe were there at the meeting, it captures the stuff correctly. And, if you want any thoughts on that, I'd love to hear them out too.
I think it's,
Go ahead.
things are.
Oh, okay.
No, I think it's a great summary and accurate to how our discussion followed, actually. Couple of things. This draft, I guess, now what?
Well, I think the question is, if we should get comments from folks, and then if we've got agreement on how we operate, then we ought to, I don't think we need to adopt these formally, but this would just be the way we would generally operate our meetings, and then we agree to that.
If you see, so we would post that in terms of the general rules of demeanor related to our conduct related to the board. The unedited version is actually posted right now, so it would just be I don't think of that.
So why don't you give us some timeline?
Okay, this is good, I'm liking.
Homework.
Well, this is good. What, can you get back to me within a week? You know, by this time next week, we have any comments? Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, but actually I had some comments now.
Well, if you want to give those, feel free.
Well, I think really we do need to spend some time looking at how we're going to do this public forum, particularly around if we're going to hear or receive comments on business that we're going to act on, and to put it only at the public forum after the meeting is over defeats the purpose of hearing what citizens may want to say around a particular item that we are going to act on. Secondly, I like checks and balances of power. So to leave at the discretion totally of the president to define time limits or extend, I feel needs to have with concurrence of the board. While you may have a good president at a given moment, does not mean that at the next moment you have a good president who then may use that at his or her advantage. So I think that concurrence needs to be there. And the other part that I would comment on would be the composition and how the composition of the executive committee comes together. Because there was nothing, we do talk about how the committee of accessible transportation is comprised. And then we know that finance and audit consists of 3 board members. I think also on that, there is the finance person who's a part of that. And I think that needs to be added, so that there's clarity. And then how we get there. Right.
So, yeah.
Those are the
So you're saying
engagement that I'm seeing in this point.
Okay, good one. So you're saying if we have an executive committee, let's make clear who it is and who's there. And what the
Right,
role is.
it's saying, yeah, that changed, and it says it's new, but there is nothing about the
Yeah, I hear you.
composition, it's
I
just a
hear you.
committee.
I hear you.
So those were the kind of ones that I was looking at just off the top.
Yeah, so if you want to, Nemo, go ahead.
Well, and I was gonna say, the one that I need to think about a little bit more is the one change here which says no public testimony or comments.
Yeah.
That sounds a little bit too strict.
Okay.
And
I figured that the board would have that reaction.
yeah, and, you know, I wouldn't be comfortable saying no testimony, but I think we do have to have some ability to limit somehow. I just need to do some
Limited, please. Good, okay, so if you can get back to me with comments, we can maybe put some final, some more, finalize this in one way. I think, Steve, you also mentioned that we didn't, the impact was not shown in one of the committees, for example.
So, Trimet as an organization is a member of 2 metro regional government bodies. Neil, as general manager, serves on the Joint Policy Committee on Transportation. And I've been designated as the cannon fodder to go to OPAC, which is a policy advisory committee. It doesn't actually have a vote that actually decides things. It advises the Metro Council on issues related to largely land use, but because so much of land use is affected by many other things, it is ways into things closely aligned to transportation, economic development, and a variety of other subject matters, housing. We don't have a procedure whereby I can offer input in partnership with staff who also attend, and when I cannot be there, sit at the table as to what might be coming up, so the board could actually say, Steve, this is what we would like you to represent. What I try to do is represent through what I know and what I believe the board would say through common sense and through my own background in terms of issues associated with matters that come to an impact. But I think we need to provide for greater feedback to the board. It could be very brief, it could be an email, it could be a 1-minute presentation. It just needs to happen. The other matter, I totally lost my mind because I'm going to be 59 and I'm going to
We see you cruise.
Lay young man.
I'll think of it and shoot an email to everybody
Okay.
about what we discussed.
Thank you. All right, well, that's all I have on the agenda. Is there anything else? All right, thank you.
Oh, we see you cruise. Yes, and those come back.
Congratulations, by the way.
Yes.